diabetes and traveling. The summer holidays are upon us, and we know that planning a holiday with diabetes is like mobilizing a small military operation. Normally, my suitcase is half full of diabetes paraphernalia and sweet things. So we thought this would be a great topic to talk about. We know that there are lots of questions about it. We get asked all the time, what do I take on holiday? What goes in the hand luggage? What goes in the hold? What do I take from my doctor? What can I go through security with? Lots and lots of questions. So we'll start with some introductions and a bit of housekeeping.
I forgot Mum wasn't here.
Oh, yeah.
Brought her some flowers.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so can we ask everyone please to mute yourselves? And that just means through the main part of Dr. Patel's presentation, we won't get any interruptions. We've saved 20 minutes at the end of the webinar to take some questions. So put your hand up, message us if you've got any burning questions, and we'll try to get to everybody. If we don't get a chance, then we'll email you after the webinar with lots of information and links, and you'll get a chance to reply to those emails and ask us any questions, and we can go away and find out some answers for you. And if you do miss any parts of the webinar, we're actually recording it this evening, and we'll put the full webinar on our UTD Digital Hub on our website. But I'll send you the link for that anyway. And we'll do that throughout the year. So we'll have all 6 of our webinars recorded so that you can go back and view them again. And we hope you'll join us for the other ones. Okay, so...
Just to say, the chat's at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to add in a question in the chat box, we'll keep an eye on it.
Wonderful. So yes, some introductions. We're very, very lucky and honoured to have our colleague, Dr. Mayank Patel, with us this evening. Dr. Patel is a consultant in diabetes at the University Hospital in Southampton. He's a clinical and senior lecturer at the University of Southampton, and he's also a multi-quality and care award winner for all the work he does for people with diabetes. And we've worked with Dr. Patel for about 18 years now, and I think, Claire, we've probably lost count of how many times we worked together.
Many.
So I will let Dr. Patel introduce himself shortly. For those that don't know me, my name is Lee Calladine. I'm the event coordinator here at Diabetes Research and Wellness Foundation. I've been here for 19 years this year, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 25 years. So I hope that gives me a bit of insight into living with diabetes as part of my role here at the charity as well. Over to you, Claire.
Hi, yes. So I'm Claire Levy. I look after the public relations and communications and work very closely with Lee on events. I was diagnosed with what we thought was type 2 diabetes back in 2017 while I was still based in the office. But that has since been re-diagnosed as what gets called LADA or type 1.5, as I have got some antibodies. So a little bit complicated, but I now do use insulin on a regular basis.
And do we have a Dr. Patel
in the house?
In the house.
Hello, Lee. Hello, Claire. Thank you, Lee, for a very kind introduction. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see so many of you here this evening, and I look forward to talking to you very soon about traveling with diabetes. So shall we just crack on then, Lee?
I think so.
Okay. So thank you, Georgina, who's kindly on slide moving duty this evening. So hi, everyone, again. It's lovely to be here. As Lee alluded to, traveling is a very popular pastime and theme for lots of us with and without diabetes. I sincerely hope that during the course of this evening, regardless of the type of diabetes you happen to have or know somebody that has, there'll be something you'll learn and take away with you relevant before the trip, during the trip, and after the trip. And in essence, we hope to offer you what's called an effective passport to effective planning, every pun intended, of course, from that perspective. And we'll take a deep dive again. We're just doing a lot of this, so brace yourselves, in terms of really trying to drill down on some of the themes that may cause some sugar diabetes wobble, shall we say, when it comes to traveling. So whether you're planning to race across the world, as I know that television program's on currently, which I believe has somebody who has type 1 diabetes doing it. So it just demonstrates, case in point, that it shouldn't be a block to traveling. But tonight is about any kind of diabetes, I hope. There's something for everybody as I'm talking to you. So next slide, please, Georgina. So of course, you all have diabetes. And of course, with that, present some additional life challenges from time to time. But the number of you, I'm sure, live very well with diabetes, and that's great, and that's the hope. And we all need a break from time to time from the everyday work or other stress or whatever life throws at us. So it's important to plan some time away or time out. But regardless of what you choose to do, diabetes is going to be with you. And sometimes the things you may have planned may be something the diabetes is not particularly familiar with. So some additional consideration might be needed. But I guess what I want to start by saying is that it's okay if you're going away to just take your foot off the gas for a bit and try and, holidays about fun. And whilst, of course, attention to diabetes is important and serious, it's okay to just relax a few things here and there, as hopefully we'll allude to as we go through the slides this evening. So I hope that sets the scene for how I'm framing this. I can't obviously comment on all of our individual cases, but I'm just offering hopefully some generic guiding principles of things to consider with help from Lee and Claire as we go through on things and issues and issues and ideas to think about as you plan your trip, when you go on your trip, when you're there, and when you're coming back. All things to be considering if you have diabetes. Next slide, please, Georgina. Okay, so let's start from the before. So before we go away, it's about thinking what you're going to be doing and where you're going. So let's start on the before. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I just mentioned just now, on holiday, you want to have the best time, of course you do, and do everything you can to ensure it's plain sailing in terms of just no surprising diabetes shocks that ruin things for you unexpectedly. So I hope tonight will give you a forum, a checklist, if you like, of things to be considering before you go. And as I said at the outset, please don't feel you have to achieve absolute glucose perfection on holiday. You really don't. You can have a good time despite numbers perhaps not being where they are ordinarily. There are going to be things that happen on holiday, or in any walk of life really, that are beyond your direct control. It's important you try and make your peace with that, but equally try and anticipate where you can, where things could be affecting diabetes that you weren't expecting them to be in the mix. For example, a delayed flight, choppy weather, turbulence, those sorts of things, metaphorical or literal, can sometimes destabilize diabetes for a period. But hopefully, walking through this evening, number of things we've considered will give you a number of ideas and thoughts around how you can navigate some of these tricky potential situations. Next slide, please. Okay, so these pre-flight checks you'll have seen a gazillion times. Before you get on the plane, there's all these sort of things to do. But I'm going to start talking about things before you even get to the airport. So let's go to the next slide then. Okay, so before you go, these are sort of things to be thinking about. Considering who'll be going, i.e., are you going by yourself with diabetes, or is someone going with you? Children, partners, parents, aging parents, individuals with other additional needs, and just think about how might that impact on you personally, as I think is a thing to think about. Think about the choice of activities you'll be doing, and we'll come back to that a bit later. And that matters because certain activities risk sugar levels going down, certain activities risk sugar levels going up. So it depends. Walking and things on the flat, for example, can lower sugar levels, but climbing and hill walking, for example, can raise sugar levels. So think about the physical activity you're going to be engaging in. Think about when in the year you're planning to go, and also about how you're going to get there, where you're going. Is it high altitude? Is it low altitude? Is it a hot place, a cold climate? All these things are known to have different effects on blood glucose levels. And it'd be lovely if it was consistent all the time, but different people tell me, I went to a cold place and this happened. Somebody else tells me I went to a cold place and this happened, but it could be something different. So there are some science-based physiology things that happen, but it can also be quite unpredictable. Also think about the modes of transport you'll be using to get on your trip, right from how you're going to get to the airport. You know, are you going to be catching a plane again, a second flight, or catching onto a boat? You get the idea. So think about all the potential steps and bits and pieces that you might need between each step of your journey before you get to your final destination, if it's not just a one mode of transport trip. Ideally, advanced planning as much as possible with diabetes is really helpful, because then you can try and anticipate things that may make things become a bit unstuck, whereby a bit of time is needed to get information. So if, for example, you want to just you need to demonstrate proof that you are fit to travel, as it were, you might need some sort of medical official piece of paper, a certificate, a letter. And these things, as we know from healthcare, may take a little while to come through. So again, I can't speak for the whole country in terms of how your local team or healthcare setup operates, but I know certainly locally there are some pressures, and we do our best to supply information to our patients when asked for things like this in a timely manner, but equally sometimes it's not always possible. A little thing called Brexit happened a few years ago. So again, I'm not read up on it recently, but there might be some tweaks or travel rules changes to where you're going to. So maybe having a look at where you're planning to visit and think about, is there anything I need to be doing specifically differently about this place I'm going to that might help you? So bear these sorts of things in mind before you decide to pack your suitcase. Next slide, please. And again, the things we talk about that again are common sense, I hope, to lots of you, and nothing here should be a surprise, but travel insurance. A travel health card is important, which is not a substitute for travel insurance, as you well know. The card only gives you basic health rights, and it's not a substitute for getting official travel insurance. Look at the foreign travel website from gov.uk, which jabs you might need. I definitely would not gamble on not having the right jabs for somewhere a bit more off the beaten track, particularly diabetes. As I'm sure you well know, if glucose levels run high, unfortunately, that can be a magnet for infections and attract infections and delay healing from cuts and wounds and such like. So please, I wouldn't skimp on jabs. For the inner linguist in you, having some stock phrases or using AI, etc., to get some phrases on your phone, etc., the names of your medications or insulins, or to say I have diabetes, where's the hospital, a translation app. These are some things you may consider wanting to use. Using healthcare abroad, you might want to briefly explore what options are open to you if you're concerned, you know, there may be a need to go to a local hospital. Hopefully not, but it's about just doing a bit of a recce, if you like, in terms of what's could be there. As I touched on earlier, the activities you've got planned for you and your family, think about what these might mean for someone having diabetes. And again, if you do get ill abroad, which some people do, invariably a funny tummy or such like, having some sick day guidance on hand is also helpful. At this point, I'll break briefly. Lee and Claire, any thoughts on what I've said so far about these sorts of background things to think about?
Yeah, I think sick day advice. I'm sure you're going to come on to maybe carrying a keto meter if you've got one, just monitoring and the sick day advice. I got a whole, you know, follow this guidance if you are poorly and checking your ketones.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people maybe don't. Well, I hadn't considered before, so I think it's good to know. And we've got the leaflet that you've authored about sick day rules and how to manage when you're poorly, and it is so important, I think, isn't it? And especially you say when you're abroad and maybe it's hot and you need more fluids and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that, Claire. Thank you. Definitely,
Yeah.
it's coming up, I'm sure of it. Thank you for raising it. Lee,
Yeah.
anything to add based on your personal experiences or?
Yeah, I think the same. For me, it's just about doing my preparation before I go. As you say, depending on where you're going, just doing a bit of research into the local area. Is there a hospital? Some stock phrases. I do a lot of planning for the airport experience, because that's one of the parts of traveling that I find the most stressful. And funnily enough, it's one of the parts of the holiday that affects my blood glucose levels.
Can imagine.
And I think that's probably stress. So I do plan quite a bit around having the right information with me, being very transparent when I go through security, and having everything there ready to show the officials. But yeah, quite often my blood sugar can spike into the 20s when I go through security. I
Sure,
think.
we'll walk through some of those bits and bobs, no problem. I guess what for the audience, I think what I hope I'm not making you feel worried about. I must always plan. It's just that having a plan, it just alleviates some of the fear, really. I think, and of course, people are spontaneous. I get it. People might think, do you know what? Next week, I'd like to go off to visit, I don't know, to Florida next week. And I'm not saying we're not, of course, saying don't do that. We're just saying perhaps just having a little written checklist somewhere in your diary, stuck to your fridge. It just means that having something written down in one place you can go back to again and again and again, tick off with every trip, then you just know those bits and pieces are covered off. Don't carry it in your head, just have a list somewhere. And Lee's recording today, so you can always come back and revisit this should you wish to. And obviously, I'm sure we can provide a transcript of some of the stuff we talk about if needed. Okay, next slide, let's move on. So I know time is going to fly, no pun intended, but let's try and move on. So again, hopefully something for everyone tonight. So back to before you go, we haven't even got anywhere near an airport yet. There's still a few things to think about. So if you're on insulin, regardless of diabetes type, it's worth thinking about from your local team, etc. Do you need to change your doses for any particular reason or timings? Because obviously, if you're flying westward, you're going to have a longer day. You're flying eastward, your day's going to get shorter. So there may be a need to perhaps consider insulin dose and timings potentially if needed. Think about where you're going. Can you get insulin over there, as it were? And if you do that, how would you do that? Because obviously, I think just saying I'll walk into a pharmacy and get it might be more difficult. So that's something to really think about. The time zones, again, not just because of days getting longer or shorter, but there are obviously lots of wearable technology has clocks and like the sensors and insulin pumps. So having the clock moved to the keeping on UK time if it helps you initially is a helpful thing to do. Because some people prefer to, for example, if you take a long-acting insulin, some people like to take it at the same time, literally every day, regardless of what time it might be abroad. But if it's going to be impractical, like 3 o'clock in the morning local time, you may have to navigate how you change the timings and get advice on that if you're not sure. If you're somebody using an insulin pump, it's worth making sure you document your pump settings on a separate piece of paper, or off just using a phone or just technology, because we know all of us technology is not bulletproof. So having a good old-fashioned paper printout of something is helpful, or a screenshot on somebody else's phone of your key pump metrics and settings is also really helpful, such as how to convert to insulin pens if your pump decides to have a moment on holiday or not work properly. And we'll talk about equipment soon, as Claire alluded to shortly. And with pumps in mind, for those with type 1 diabetes, some of you may think, actually, I don't want to take my pump with me. I've had enough of it. I want to have a break. And people do that, and it's absolutely fine. Some people choose to go back onto insulin pens for a few days whilst on holiday. And again, that's absolutely fine again as well. Locally, we ask our local GPs to ensure that any patient on an insulin pump has a supply of insulin pens at home for pump emergencies or such like. So it shouldn't be a shock if you have to ask your GP for insulin pens. It should be considered normal practice to have insulin pens just to cover you for broken pump situations anyway. So it shouldn't be too much of a stretch or a reach. And on the left picture here, you can see examples of bands that people can wear to highlight to others medical alert jewelry, to alert others to the fact that they have other health conditions. So if, God forbid, you are, for example, drowsy or unwell or can't converse for whatever reason, individuals around you can see that a different health condition that needs attention.
Before you go, I've got a question from Adam saying about his Omnipod is probably covered, he said, but can he take spare pumps in his hand luggage and also wear it through security scanners?
So I think I'm coming to the wearing of it in a minute. I'm coming to that. A spare pods, because each pod only lasts 3 days, Claire. So absolutely, you should have enough pods to last you for the trip. And pods in hand luggage, as far as I know, is okay because it shouldn't be causing a problem. But equally, if you're carrying several pods, in case you're not in case you risk luggage getting lost, God forbid, it's worth spreading the pumps out across different luggage bags. But that I'll come to in a second with kit and how to carry it. If that helps. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we touched on Recon already. So is that you, Lee? I don't know. Possibly. I'm not sure. It's a nice hat if it is. So again, touching base with local surgery about if you need letter, just do it early. Don't do it the night before. It's not going to happen, I can assure you. So do your best to get letters early, that documentation. This generally outlines the person reading it. This person has diabetes. That's why they're carrying needles, syringes, insulin, and ideally having a different language as well of the country you're going to, which you can, I'm sure, assist with in terms of when you get your letter, you can perhaps translate it into the language you're going to be using wherever you're going to, for example, what the native languages, for example. And carrying technology, carrying tech, I think pumps and stuff is fine personally, but just that small print, just look at the airline website. I'd hope Lee can agree with me that more and more, I can't vouch for every airline, but certainly in the UK airports, airlines slightly different, so I appreciate. Their websites are recognizing more and more individual travelers do have other health needs, and the tech is creeping in because its use is so increasing so much now. Is that your experience, Lee, in terms of just the recommendation, check the airline, or
Yeah, you can speak to them before you travel. And if you've got dietary requirements or medical requirements, they're really responsive.
Yeah. I can't see why carrying an insulin pump or spare insulin pods in your hand luggage is going to cause a problem. Ideally, having a letter with it is going to make it a bit easier for you. And in-flight meals, I appreciate with diabetes, you might think, oh my gosh, I can't possibly have a regular meal. I recommend the advice I've read and researched, they always say have the regular meal because perhaps the carb content won't be as high as you might think, for example. So better off having that than risking something inappropriate. They maybe have other sweeteners in it or something alternative that may disagree with you or cause other sugar-related issues. So stick to this regular meal, I would suggest. Insulin-wise, think about how you're going to store it when you get to where you're going to get to. This is the destination, because obviously, as you know, it's best to keep insulin if it's being used at room temperature, not in a hot room. And some hotel rooms have fridges, for example. So think about those sorts of modalities of where you're going to, or Frio carrier bags to keep stuff cool as well. So there's different ways of things to think about if you're using insulin in a hot place, for example. Next slide, please. So busy slide, let's walk through it. So now we're getting into the nub of it, the suitcase, okay? So the suitcase, always take more stuff than you need. Never just take the bare minimum. Take 2 to 3 times more than you might think you need, be that insulin or diabetes tablets, for example. And extra things to consider taking would be perhaps over-the-counter painkillers. I'd probably stick to simple things like paracetamol, and be careful with things like what I call non-steroidal painkillers, anti-inflammatories, like Voltarol or ibuprofen, which in small doses are okay, but if you're particularly dehydrated and take them, there's just that small chance they can upset your kidneys a bit more if you're dry, God forbid. So just on occasion, just be careful, but recognize that don't pop too many of those, particularly if you're quite dehydrated, I would suggest. For funny tummies, you may have your preferred therapy, Imodium, loperamide type medications, those sorts of things. Travel sickness tablets or wristbands, I know some people use. It's personal choice, really. As Claire mentioned about testing strips, again, we're very keen to encourage everyone who's traveling using insulin to not just solely use their wearable technology to guide glucose levels, because tech is not bulletproof, and sometimes hot and cold climates can do funny things to tech as well, unexpectedly and unfortunately. So good old-fashioned finger pricking blood glucose machines should be taken, and blood ketone sticks rather than urine sticks are preferred, because urine ketones, in case you weren't aware, are measuring ketones in your urine. That could be old news. That urine could have sat in your bladder for several hours. So we encourage the use of blood ketones to give you a real-time ketone number, attached to which can be risk of a red, amber, or a green level risk of ketone levels. Working meters with batteries, of course, plenty of needles for insulin, working insulin pens, enough sensors to last you, wearable disposable pumps, as somebody alluded to earlier, somewhere to put the sharps, of course, and the needly things, the cannulas, where to put them, alcohol-free hand wipes. A lot is obvious, I appreciate, but I think it's helpful to hopefully reinforce for all of you listening. Hand sanitizer, these tech patches, and adhesives to think about how things are going to stay sticking to you. The cool bag is something helpful, which can keep insulin cool for a very long time, because hot weather can often, unfortunately, really disrupt the way which insulin works. It can denature insulin. It doesn't work properly in prolonged heat. So that's something to be aware of. You'll all, of course, have your favorite snacks to support low glucose levels. And for the airport, of course, you can buy drinks in the airport, but in your own bag, you may wish to carry liquid glucose type fluids for hypo antidotes that you prefer to use, that you know will work. Medication list is helpful, shared with friends and family with you, such as a repeat prescription. The right insulin only in your hand luggage and not in the suitcase, because altitude will freeze insulin. So never ever carry insulin in suitcases in the hold of an aircraft, always in your bag. And ideally in a clear bag so it's easily visible, so you're not trying to hide anything. People can see what it is. Even if you're going with an insulin pump, recommend you take insulin pens with you, so that dreaded situation of pump malfunction. Some sort of medic ID, as I said, alluded to already. An emergency contact as well. Emergencies, who you're going to call if you're going on your own. Who should you be phoned if you're having problems, God forbid. Emergency numbers, that sort of thing. And of course, appropriate clothes and footwear, which we'll come back to later. Some individuals tell me they send stuff in advance. It's a bit extreme, but if you know you're going for a long time, that might be a safe way of ensuring you've got plenty of supplies out there. So couple of our patients went away for like 6 months a little while ago for work and travel. So that was a bit of a logistical thing to plan for, but they did it and it all worked out in the end. Lee, Claire, jump in, please. Any themes?
Andy from Southampton, he's had a pump changed and the training said the TX Slim pump shouldn't go through security scanners. Or the
Okay, so I think airport is coming in the next couple of slides, so hold that thought. So thank you for asking the great question.
Paul's asked about sharps bins. Can you get a travel one? I've got a 1 litre one, a little about that big.
I'd have to ask locally. In truth, I've seen small ones, but we don't have them in the hospital here, so I suspect they're out there, Claire. It's how you source them might be tricky, I'll be honest.
Doctor asks, I mean, I only got a little one because I've been having the 7 litre ones and they sent me a 1 litre. I thought I'll keep it for travel. Okay. Mary said, please never ever put your medication in your checked baggage, hand baggage for everything. And if you have a sunflower lanyard in the UK, great for going through security, which is really good.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it says,
I would put everything in my hand luggage. I don't put any of my diabetes supplies in my suitcase that's being checked in. Because you never know when you're going to get separated from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Danny said,
Mayank and I had that experience last year. We flew to Austria, and when we got to Innsbruck, our suitcases were still in Vienna. Diabetes supplies are in your case, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, Danny said you can get a medical bag as well as your hand luggage on some flights. I've seen that actually. They're available on Amazon and other well-known shopping travel things, I'm sure. Mary said she has a 0.6 litre travel sharps bin.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Gosh, every day's a school day. This is very tough, guys. Thank you very much for sharing. This is brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great intel.
Just quickly, Amy, as Lee said, I also find traveling through airport really stressful. BG levels skyrocket, partly due to past bad experience. And now traveling with 2 incontinent children. Generally keep everything in hand luggage. So.
All right.
Oh, sunflower lanyards. I'm not quite sure where you get them from, but.
I've got a link to the Hidden Disabilities company.
Okay.
On the email that's going to go out after the webinar. So, and they do lanyards, they do different cards.
Yep.
They've got a range of services.
They have. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've covered most there.
Okay. Next slide, please, Georgina. Thank you. I'm very mindful of time. I want to get through everything in timely fashion. Sharing is caring. So again, as I've said several times, apologies, but I think it's really important with diabetes that you feel comfortable disclosing to others, friends and family with you, what may happen, God forbid, or just preempting what the stuff we all take for granted without diabetes could be a wobble for those with diabetes. So as I said, Lee and I traveled last year, and I guess I'll be honest, there were a couple of things happened to Lee that I would have just thought, oh my gosh, that didn't think of that. So this has been really useful opportunity to present some of these things tonight. So it's important you feel comfortable sharing the medication list, the doses, your pump settings, and explain to people if I become ill, God forbid, and I can't communicate this, please show this to somebody medical, because it can be really important. And the insulin carrying, as we said, the snacks, technology is important in separate places, ideally, in case one bag, as Lee said, goes missing, God forbid. And just again, splitting testing strips, that shared letter, photocopy it more than once if you have to. Have it in more than one place. A photograph on a phone, the hard paper copy in 2 bags. You get the idea. And sick day guidance, a leaflet, shameless plug. So I worked with Lee and Claire and Charity to produce this leaflet. It's free on their website. It's not a travel leaflet, but it does contain some generic guidance on being less ill for less time, if you like, if you happen to have diabetes abroad or in the UK. And again, there's no reason why I can't, of course, have a photograph of information on phones and share with others. Does that cover that, Lee and Claire? Would you feel?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think as you say, get that letter early and get your medication, extra medication early.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Right, another shameless plug. So something I've been involved in since 2014, which I can't believe is 11 years ago, is producing type 1 diabetes comic books, which are free to download from this website. I'm not on commission, I promise you. They're absolutely free. And across 5 issues to date, we've endeavored to cover off a load of relevant themes in type 1 diabetes, presented in a kind of hopefully fun but informative comic book fashion. So this screenshot is Comic 3, which was launched in 2021, I believe, called Stigma. And our friend Nathan Hunt, the agent on the front cover, has type 1 diabetes. He has to travel, and there's just a screenshot there of what he's done, which I've tried to lift from the real world. So no more spoilers from me. Please go and read the comic in full, and you can enjoy yourself and have a read. And it covers off a few themes around travel just there and some other bits as well. So I'm going to leave that right there. But onwards, please, Georgina.
And Mayank's very humble. Those comic books are
Ace.
amazing, and he
Bless
won
you.
an award for them as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. It's very kind. And as I'm among friends, I can tell you Comic 6 will drop sometime this year. Spoiler alert. So watch this space. It's coming. That's what I'm going to say. I've said too much already, but I'll leave that there. Okay, we now got to the airport, guys. So thank you for sticking with me. Here we go. So we've touched on some of these themes already, which is great. You've preempted, anticipated what I'm going to ask you and talk about. So a medical awareness card. There's a website called t1resources.uk, which I believe still offers a version of something you can use. If not, Lee's got some links, I believe, afterwards to share where you might find something similar. Airport, somebody asked about tech. Yeah, so as far as I understand it, the rules seem to change for certain tech. It feels like every week. But generally speaking, I would suggest that pumps, wearable sensors and Libras, Dexcoms and such like, don't go through an x-ray machine and full body scanners. So I think I'd tell the security guy, look, I have diabetes, here's my letter, I'm wearing this particular device, and they can put the wand over the device itself to look for anything illicit or dodgy. That's what I would suggest to all of you. I wouldn't even go through the hands up machine that you used to have to stand through, I wouldn't even do that wearing tech just in case. But you'd hope that in most UK airports, they've seen it so many times as security supervising staff to know exactly what to do. So have that thought in mind. Maybe some comments in the chat may come up around this in a minute, we can see. And if your way you feel you're being treated is not appropriate, you just think, hang on, I'm being a bit accused of being whatever, do ask for somebody senior. It's okay, you have your right to do that. And as Lee said earlier, perhaps nudging the airport ahead of time, the airline asking, look, what's the situation here? Because that's an important thing to do. And I know Lee and Claire have worked with Bournemouth Airport, at the very least, for example, to think about airport planning. We talked about snacks and fluids because security can take ages. So being hydrated or buying stuff in the airport, of course. And of course, Sunflower lanyard cards, as we touched on earlier, are a really good resource to have for you. Hidden disabilities, really important to highlight that to the uninitiated. That's important. And the picture here shows something called, it's a medical device awareness card. That's the picture from the top link, essentially. So do think about that as well as raising awareness. Lee, Claire, anything around x-rays or scans that I've not mentioned, Lee, from personal experience? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been through with CGM before. Some airports insist that you go through the scanner, and some airports are very understanding. I think if you're wearing a Sunflower lanyard and card and you present yourself when you do check-in or at security, they will generally take you through a different channel and use the wand. And it's a bit more of a speedy, less stressful process than having to queue up and go through the body scanners.
Andy Ost is saying UK's fine, other countries are more tricky. Nikki Smith said, I travelled through Gatwick 2 weeks ago. Security were really good. Didn't bat an eyelid. Crete were very stressful coming home. That was Sally. So I think it depends on the airport where you're going.
I'm sorry, I appreciate, even the UK is not bulletproof in certain, I've heard horror stories, but that was a while ago. I'd like to think things are a bit better now in the UK, but of course the world's a big place. We can't sadly vouch for every single airport globally, but if you have a bad experience, I definitely would feed it back. I think that otherwise nothing changes, does it? So I feel that from feeding back positive and bad experiences, I think it's important in any walk of life, really. I think it's a helpful thing to do moving forward, given that the number of people with diabetes is increasing, of course, and the number of people wearing technology devices is
Yeah.
also rising as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Onwards. Next slide, please, Georgina. Thank you. Okay, so pumps. So we're getting on close to the plane now. So again, if you're getting onto a plane and using an insulin pump, what's important is that you enable the flight mode feature, because as you well know, the whole point of that is to stop the interference between your tech and the flight and the plane potentially. But we should not absolutely, I had this question before, what you should not be doing is suspending insulin delivery. So even if you go on flight mode, the pump will still deliver insulin. It's just that from the point of view of, traveling, it's just being careful about the advice you're given with tech on flights. Next slide, please. Just remember Yep. So time-wise, we touched on some of these things already. So again, if you're flying west, your day is going to get longer. If you fly east, your day will get shorter. So think about what that means for you in terms of injection timings, the need to carry enough snacks and such like, carrying a watch on UK time to give yourself a sense of orientation. That's important as well. The in-flight meal, again, you might want to eat some dessert or some fruit. That's okay. It's all fine as you're monitoring yourself. Check your sugars periodically. It's worth making sure you keep well hydrated on a flight, because again, as you know, one of the best antidotes for high sugar levels is simple sugar-free liquids to hydrate. Alcohol, I hope the days of people getting completely plastered before going onto a plane is a thing of the past, but we know people do sometimes indulge a bit more than they should, perhaps for their nerves or because they're excited. But alcohol, again, can be disinhibiting to people. It can increase your risk of having low sugar levels. It can also increase you pass more water and risk becoming more dehydrated, which indirectly can raise sugar levels. So be careful. Caffeine can also raise sugar levels as well. So be mindful not having excessive caffeine. And foot care, again, on a long flight, just stretching your legs, not bare feet, I'd suggest on a plane, but just, flight socks or whatever, or your usual shoes, just to wander on the plane to stretch your legs, get the blood pumping, calf muscles working. That's a helpful thing to do, I think, as well. Lee, Claire, any thoughts around those bits?
I've got a question about flight mode.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, do you disconnect? I said, you've said flight mode. Kate
Yeah.
said flight mode will also affect Libre 2 Plus sensor connecting with phone via Bluetooth ?
Yeah. So
Steve
it's
said flight mode on Bluetooth, flight mode, but Bluetooth on. Is that right?
from my experience, what people ask me about, yeah, that's my understanding of how it should be. Because obviously, if you're on a long flight and your pump can't talk to your sensors, it's a bit difficult, obviously, for the pump to work and regulate instant delivery. So, I would say yes, personally. Obviously, if people come unstuck or have had experience of it, please let us know. Some people talk about a pump need to be disconnected. Like I said, I'm nervous disconnecting a pump entirely in terms of taking off the cannula and everything. I can't see how that's going to make a difference on a flight, because of course for takeoff and landing you could suspend. I think there's some worry that if you suspend insulin delivery, it may increase your risk of bubbles in the tubing developing. So this is a bit of a grey area, I'll be honest. And I've read both ways, but it's something we should perhaps look into a bit more. I can try and do some digging afterwards and see what the current position is on it. It's just recognizing these things can be a potential issue, but flight mode is a yes. Bluetooth on sort of makes sense intuitively, but to disconnect your pump entirely sounds a bit over the top. Personally, my concern is that, as I say, you may risk developing bubbles in the tubing, etc. But I'll try and get more of an official position on that, because I get conflicting reports on these sorts of topics. But it's an important thing to pick up before you go.
Okay.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, let's have a look. Where are we? Okay, fingers crossed now. We've almost got to where we're going. So it's looking good. So if you're away, you've got to check into your hotel, of course. It's a good time to look at the insulin supplies, make sure nothing's crystallized or got cloudy unexpectedly, which suggests the insulin could have been damaged somehow in the travel process. But as I say, hopefully in hand luggage, that should not happen. But if you put in the freezers in the luggage, and your stored luggage, it's going to be a problem, I suspect, because of high altitude and freezing insulin. Time zones, I've said repeatedly, on your pump. The clock might need changing, UK time, local time. Keep a clock on local time if it makes UK time, if it helps you navigate where you are. If you're going to a theme park of some sort on a pump, it may be worth getting a fast pass, because sometimes it just means that sometimes there's a worry on some roller coasters that the nature of the pump, the nature of a roller coaster, the ups and downs of it can affect the way in which insulin's, going through your cannula, for example. So sometimes they may ask you to take your pump off for literally the few minutes you're on the ride and reconnect it when you get back on again. In the same way that if you're going for a dip, and some pumps aren't waterproof, you disconnect it for a period up to no more than 60 minutes in a swimming situation and reconnect it afterwards. You could be eating different food, perhaps, taking alcohols, and then mitigate for those sorts of things best you can. Foot care was mentioned, so again, urge everybody not to walk around bare feet, particularly on hot sand. If you're known to have reduced sensation on your feet already from diabetes, hopefully not, but if you do, that's not a reason you can't go on a sandy beach, but just not bare feet, because if that hot sand stings and burns the skin, you may not feel it until you get back to your room and see very red feet, broken skin, blistering, pain, problem. Never underestimate the power of simple hydration, not flooding, just watering. So for most people, if you can try and drink, say, give or take, up to 1.5 to 2 litres of sugar-free liquids across the whole day, particularly in a hot climate, that's helpful. If you're feeling very hot, just make sure you're not having a hypo, because there's a few symptoms that can be very similar from heat stroke or low sugars. Dizzy, lightheaded, a bit muzzy, can be a tell for heat stroke or a low glucose level. And also overseas, sometimes the way in which glucose is expressed in units, where in the UK we use millimoles per litre, overseas, if you're hospitalized, God forbid, or have to use an overseas glucose machine, it might give you a number in milligrams per deciliter. A rough rule of thumb, if you're converting your numbers to overseas numbers, you times it by 18. If you're presented with an overseas number in milligrams per deciliter, divide it by 18 to give you your UK equivalent, if you like. Lee, Claire, any thoughts around that? Or
for me, again, it was the foot care that I flagged when we were chatting about this. I just think keep your feet moisturized and just check them regularly, because it's so easy to damage your feet. You bump into things in the room, stub your toe.
Yeah.
Different shoes, feet are hot and sweaty, and maybe you get a blister. And I think just really, really watch your feet.
Yeah, thank you.
I think for me, it's the hydrate and the hypo. I make sure I drink a lot of water on holiday if I'm in a hot country, because I find that there's probably a transition period for the first few days when I'm high quite a bit, and I think that's down to the heat and dehydration, so I keep an eye on that.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so off the beaten track, backpacks and hacks. Some of you may choose to have a really sedentary, relaxing, I'm going abroad, I'm going to sit on the beach and do nothing. Of course, that's absolutely great, and I'm very jealous of those who can do that. And for those others, hopefully, some of those may do a bit of both, maybe sitting on a beach for a few days versus being active, doing stuff, going off grid, going onto nature trails and hikes, altitude, city walks on the flat. People do different things, and as I said earlier, alluded to, different physical activity can do different things to your glucose levels. So typically resistance works at altitude, high climbing against altitude and slopes and inclines can raise sugar levels, whereas on the flat or going downhill, glucose burning can drop sugar levels. So it can go either way. So just be vigilant, monitor, and look for signs and tells that something isn't quite as it should be. Next slide. Thank you, Georgina. Yeah, so again, general tips. What can I say to you? If you're on a group tour, some people book these trips, so worth making sure perhaps letting your person organising the tour, if you have additional needs, not just diabetes, other things that they may be aware of, that's helpful for everyone to know about. Physical activity, insulin, Instagram, boom, boom. So again, where are we? That's about people. Yeah, just plan for what you're going to do. Think about insulin doses. Do you want to give a bit less? Corrective dose later on, a bit more. Just be mindful. Sounds obvious, a lot of the stuff I know, but you're amazed how often people sadly forget sometimes. Investing in a decent pair of glasses, if you're known to have eye disease or diabetes, unfortunately, good eye protection, avoid the excess UV is really important. Your eyes will thank you for it. A full covering hat obviously is important. The hanky on the head, perhaps not quite enough. So go invest in a decent hat with just probably not a cap. I'd say something that covers the whole head probably is better. And the back of the neck is a real risk of getting burned as well, guys. So that sort of back of neck cover is also important. Foot wise, we touched on this already. So hot sand, I mentioned the use of sunblock, checking your feet every day. Hyperglycemia can be a consequence of getting dehydrated, and sunburn, of course. Hot weather can damage insulin. Sweaty and techie. So again, it's a common theme and a problem. No one's quite cracked it, I don't think, whereby the sensors can sometimes, the hot weather makes it hard to stick to your skin. I've no clever answer. I've had everything from duct tape to other adhesives over the counter, things that people have bought online, etc., to try and in a desperate attempt to make their tech stick and not be, falling off all the time. Hydrating, we said already, and if you've got type 1 diabetes, please, if your blood sugar is more than 14 for more than 2 or 3 hours, get that fluid into you and do those ketone checks to make sure numbers are not going in the wrong direction, and follow the sick day advice about giving yourself extra additional corrective rapid insulin shots should you need to bring sugar levels down, because these everyday simple things can do wonders to mitigate and minimize the risk of needing a hospital checkup, especially on holiday, which is the last thing you want to be doing, of course. Going somewhere cold may in fact do the opposite and delay how quickly your body absorbs insulin, and therefore finger pricking might also be a bit tricky because the blood vessels will try to move away from the skin surface in an effort to keep your body core temperature up. So finger pricking in cold weather can be a bit more difficult. Extremes for anybody can obviously damage insulin and risk the fingers and digits getting very cold. And high altitude, I mentioned already, can affect the way in which your body responds. And the glucose profile can be an increased risk of dropping as well at high altitude. So be vigilant and monitor the tells and the signs of lows. Lee, Claire, anything there on the chat that's come through of hacks from individuals?
Yeah, I
Steve,
think.
sorry,
Go
just
on, Claire.
go on. Steve's asking about keeping your pump insulin tubing cool. He's new to a pump and he's off to COS in June. COS.
Pump cannula, I don't think that itself needs to be kept cool per se, but just out of direct sunlight, I think it should be be okay for tubing and cannulas. The critical thing is the insulin, and obviously any tech, sensors and phones, hot weather can damage those sorts of things. So the technology element and the insulin element, absolutely out of direct sunlight. Tubing, just try and do your best to keep it at room temperature and shaded, not just exposed to direct sunlight, I would suggest, because plasticky stuff, as you know, is malleable, may become a bit soft, which could affect its performance, I suppose.
Danny Smith wanted to say, can't emphasize enough about looking after your feet. He lost his legs 2-3 years ago now from diabetes.
I'm sorry, Danny. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So
thank you.
it's on the foot thing.
All right. We okay? Moving on. Other things again, road trip. Yeah. So lots of people choose to hire a car, don't they? Of course, when you go abroad. This is not me and Lee, our comedy versions of us. Essentially, going away, making sure that you have a valid license. It sounds obvious, but people have been caught out with this. Every plan to hire a car and do all the great stuff abroad, they get there, oh no, my license isn't valid for X, Y, and Z. So just make sure your license covers where and what you're going to be driving and doing. Medical ID, I think some places like to see that as well, just to prove, or just as a disclaimer that you have diabetes, for example. Check your travel insurance covers driving. It sounds really obvious, but just don't risk that small print. Oh, I didn't see it. There was a car accident, God forbid. I wasn't covered. None of us want that. So just this absolute preemptive, particularly travel insurance, there is so much small print and risk averse stuff. So just be really careful. So look at destinations where you're going, any particular advice on diabetes driving restrictions, shall we say. Ask the rental company where you're going to. A lot of these companies are global, aren't the global brands, aren't they? So hopefully you can ring a UK office to get an answer about something in Spain or America, for example. Check your car insurance covers that. About driving. And again, if you're a driver, like as in the UK, of course, if you're insulin, you must check sugars periodically. And in England, it's every 2 hours on a long road trip. Carry a blood machine with you, absolutely. Don't just rely on the tech alone, because if the tech is unreliable and you have an accident, God forbid, that will not be enough to say, oh my gosh, my sugars were fine. Any doubt, even with wearable technology, if the numbers look funny, back it up with a finger prick glucose check, particularly if you don't feel in the way the numbers are describing it. For me, if a tech machine says your sugar's 2 and you think, actually, I feel absolutely fine, don't just pour yourself loads of sugar in. Check the numbers first with a blood test. Be absolutely sure that is the case. Hyper snacks, of course, do take those breaks. Keep watered, and local numbers, again, is important as well for emergency services, for where you're going to, the route you're taking in particularly more remote areas. What is the cover? What is the contingency for that situation if the car breaks down, God forbid, in the middle of nowhere? These are horrible things to think about, but sadly, if you plan for it now, what they say, you plan for the worst, but you hope for the best. I think in travel, with that in mind, I think is important. Lee, Claire, any horror stories or positive stories you've heard or chat about this?
No, I think they're really good points, Mike. I've not considered asking that question for a hire car before, so that's something that's really interesting. There have been a couple of comments. I can't see there. Was it Danny saying that he's going to be driving coast to coast in America?
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, so
But-
I don't know if Danny's looked into that and had any answers about diabetes cover on the insurance or with the hire company.
Come back to us if you have, Danny. It'd be lovely to know. Thank you.
We'll just
And
add-
also, I think, sorry,
on.
Claire, I was going to say lots of questions about pumps again. You know, can you go in the pool with them? Can they go through scanners?
Yeah.
I think we'll try and answer, but I suppose, Mike, one of the best things to do is go to the pump company and ask those questions as well.
Yeah, the
Chris
pump.
Robinson said you can get covers from Omnipod through them, and they work well in pools. So that's
Yeah,
not-
so Omnipod, one of the selling points of the Omnipod patch pump is the fact it is you can swim with it. That's
Yeah.
it. The other pumps are splash proof, but not necessarily waterproof. So T-Slims, Medtronics, I don't believe are designed for swimming with. I would suggest disconnect before you wear those. Disconnect before you go into a pool, and don't disconnect for more than 60 minutes. Otherwise you risk your sugar levels climbing afterwards. After that point, Omnipods, again, the handset is not waterproof, so just the pod itself should be okay. But the company's websites are normally quite informative, and the information if the information you're after is not there, push them, because I think it's important their patient-facing, public-facing websites should have supporting guidance formally for those sorts of obvious everyday situations that they pride themselves on saying, our pump makes it easy for you to do X, Y, and Z. We'll prove it then. Put your money where your mouth is and make sure your website outlines very clearly for driving, for going for a swim, the stuff we take for granted, as I said earlier. How does the pump, what do I need to think about differently from a pump perspective? Okay, next slide, please, Georgina. Thank you. Okay, so very sadly, our holiday's now sadly coming to an end. We've got to think about coming back. So keeping calm and flying home. So again, it's a depressing thing having to leave holidays. You've had a great time, you've got to come home now. But that stress of airports, I can absolutely relate to that. Young kids, I can imagine, but then without diabetes, that was stressful enough. So add young kids and your own personal diabetes into the mix, I can see how that absolutely cause potential wobbles. Okay, so do your best to be prepared for that and make your peace with the things, unfortunately, you can't plan for or change, but perhaps make those unplannable things a bit less bothersome by having a few tools in the bag to help you out, as it were. Next slide. So you've on the way back, you've come back. Hopefully you've put your clocks back on UK time now. You might think about what went well and what didn't in terms of general diabetes planning for your holiday. Should you choose to be one of those people that goes back to the same place every year, think about, actually, next time we do this, I will do, I won't do X, Y, and Z. And being on board, with the need to be prepared, I think, as I say, I'm not trying to put anybody off traveling, of course not, but just that little checklist that works for you personally, of the sort of themes that are relevant to your situation, having that on your fridge just there, which means that if you had a last minute trip planned or unexpected trip to go abroad to see a sick relative or something, just having that emotional stress of that in your mind is hard enough. But then at least from a diabetes perspective, you've got these things written down and it's all right. I'm catching the plane tomorrow. I'm diabetes, I've got everything written down exactly here, so I know what I need to cross off without having to memorize it and learn it and remember it from last year, for example. Would you say that's worked for you, Lee or Claire, a version of that?
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
definitely preparation is everything, isn't it?
It is, and it is a learning curve, isn't it? The more times you do it, the more you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think we're coming towards the end. So next slide. Anything jumping out, Claire, from the chat at this point? Because we're approaching the end, I think.
It's the suspension of the pump from Rebecca. She's saying T-Slim 60 minutes at a time, but how long should you be back on it before disconnecting again? And I said you might need to ask your specialist nurse or your pump team.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. My worry is that because when you disconnect a pump and then restart it, it's going to take a good 30 minutes to get back in the groove again from a pump perspective. So I think minimum 30, 40 minutes, I'd say, is a minimum between disconnecting a pump, putting back on again, and disconnecting it again. I think the risk is that it's going to not be able to catch up and keep up your demand if you're chopping and changing too quickly. That's a really good question. I might try and do some more of a deeper dive into that myself, actually. That's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other one was asking about hire car in the USA with type 1. I said we can look into it, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure whether we could.
I would email the car company honestly and
Yeah.
ask that question. I think to be bulletproof and your insurance. So they're the two things I would 100% say. The hire company and your own personal insurance you're taking out. Does it cover driving in the country or going? I know it sounds obvious, but just don't assume with insurance. What I would say to you is assume nothing, believe no one, and check everything. ABC every time. Just don't go in eyes wide open and be absolutely clear. You know you're covered, so you know what your rights are. If something doesn't quite go to plan, God forbid, when you're out there. If there's a car accident, God forbid, and it's not your fault, you can imagine how awkward that's going to be if certain things weren't disclosed or declared from the outset. So just think, check in with everything. Ask about accidents. Ask about if somebody crashed into me, what's the deal for diabetes? Is there any kind of things to be considering? It's really worth asking those questions.
Just an extra one about health insurance. Andy Austin saying he's had cancer, he's type 1, insurance cover. I said, Lee, you've got specialist insurance companies, the one you use.
Yeah, I mean, generally I go with through Diabetes UK, and they use All Clear,
Yeah.
and they've been very, very good. And they're an insurance company that specialise in medical conditions, including diabetes.
Yeah,
Okay.
They
thank
have
you, Lee.
lots of different levels of cover depending on where you're going. And of course, it doesn't, we've talked about flying a lot, but that, it could be that you're going on a cruise or a coach holiday. So yeah, talk to them, and they've got some really good cover.
Because of course we understand from an insurance company perspective, if you have lots of personal medical conditions, obviously that makes you a bit of a high flight risk, as it were, from a health perspective. But for low level conditions such as diabetes, that should not be a block or a barrier and give companies an excuse to raise your premiums just because they can. So I think, as Lee said, there are specialist insurance companies that Lee is more familiar with than me, who will kindly look beyond that and do their best to get you a good deal in premium covers. You're not breaking the, because it cost you the earth to do a relatively minor trip, for example.
Okay.
Any more tips or comments or hacks or anything of note coming through?
Can
Mhm.
can finger prick tests go through scanners? They should be fine, shouldn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, should be okay. Yeah.
Estimating carbs in unfamiliar meals.
Yeah, that's a bit of an art, isn't it? I think. Nothing clever springs to mind. I guess, of course, there's the old favorite Carbs and Cals
Yeah.
app, which is not free, unfortunately. But if you're prepared to pay for a month at a time and use that to guide common meals, small, medium, large, I believe they have international foods on there as well. So more culturally diverse offerings may be there as well. So that's something that may be of use to you. There's a book version. You may find it secondhand from famous websites that sell things secondhand, shall we say. I'll leave that right there. But, you have options rather than having to. It'd be nice not to have to guess to make it be less stressful for you. But think about the food you eat. Think about the constituents of the food you eat. So is it a very fatty meal? Lots of protein? Because those sorts of things, as you know, can delay the absorption of blood glucose. And equally, to help to reduce sugar spiking, people do tell me that eating the carbs element of the meal last can also help mitigate the risk of a sugar spike, for example. Just the way in which your body is lined with proteins and fats first, bit of a barrier in the stomach, as it were, and therefore the glucose has to work a bit harder, take a bit longer to get through to cause a sugar rise.
Yeah. Can PDMs go through a scanner?
PDMs, I probably would use the wand, Claire, in truth, just until because it's so grey. It's a real shame it's so grey. You look online, you ask people, I get 50-50 in terms of yay or nay. I just think if in doubt, I would just get it wanded personally.
What about cooler bags enough for longer times abroad if you don't have access to a fridge? You could ask the hotel to put it in the fridge.
Hotel
Yeah.
fridges, yes. Lee, have you been there, Lee? Has that been a thing for you at all?
Many times with that. The cool bags are really great up to a point. If you're going out for the day and you're in a hot country and you've got to take your bag with your insulin, I normally use the Frio cool bags. They're brilliant, but even they struggle in some hot temperatures. So generally, if it's a resort or a hotel, or even some of the cafe owners have been really kind and they'll put your insulin in their cool room or in the fridge for you while you're on the beach or while you're sat out in the sun.
And it sounds a bit scary, but you might want to put it into a lockbox first, Lee, just no one tampers with it. I know it's such a terrible thing to suggest, but just in terms of mitigating risk and giving you some personal assurance, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
You can get these small lock. There's all sorts of different size lock boxes, aren't there? You can use that insulin pen size lock box and just give that to the person in the hotel or the cafe as you say, Lee. Just give you a peace of mind, so you want to carry it with you all the time. So these are things to think about, but it's important.
Or if you've got, a fridge in your room,
Yeah,
or if your hotel room's got air conditioning, quite often I'll leave my insulin there because I know I can get back very quickly to that room if I need it. Or I'm not planning to eat, but as you know, sometimes you end up in a cafe or somewhere and it's unplanned. So it's all, it's all in the personal planning, isn't it?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
decision-making.
Thank you. Anything else coming through, Claire, of note?
Breezy pack for insulin is very good.
Okay.
Back on travel, people saying I've said to them, if you declare on the questionnaire on your insurance, they all seem to offer you cover. It just obviously puts the price up a bit. But yeah, I you have to declare it as a medical condition.
Out of interest, Lee, if you don't mind asking Lee, when you do declare it, Lee, is the premium a bit of a shock? Is it much higher, or do you have any context? Or
To be honest, what I've paid for my travel insurance has always been really good and surprisingly good value for money. I don't think my type 1 diabetes has increased the premium very much. I travelled when I was going through some another health journey and having surgeries, and that didn't have much of an impact. So I think these companies do specialize heavily in medical conditions, and yeah, they're very good.
Thank you. With that, just on the subject of insurance, I just remembered insulin pumps again. It's worth, because each person will have an insulin pump warrant. You have a pump for 4 years. It's just making sure that if it gets damaged, what the insurance company is prepared to cover that as a sort of, do you add on to your policy, or do you have to declare it separately? Again, I can never get a consistent answer. I'm sorry about this. It'd be worth exploring it at your end with your insurance company. I've got an insulin pump. If this broke, am I covered? Or check with the pump company also. If my pump gets broken on holiday through no fault of my own, or if it's an accident, what's the mitigating factor around an automatic replacement? Because don't forget, if your pump is damaged overseas, God forbid, they can't generally guarantee one gets sent to you. A patient, I remember a few months ago, emailed us in the middle, I'm not joking, she's in the middle of Thailand and a pump stopped working, and he was emailing us, getting quite upset why we couldn't sort out a new pump for it. It was just not going to work. I sound really bad saying it, but it's just not possible. And she'd also not taken enough insulin with her. Therefore, it got quite close at one point. She's just about managed it, but that was a bit hairy. And that in part informed my decision for some of the slides and thoughts I've had this evening about planning, because you're going to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, the broken pump and not enough insulin. That's quite a scary situation. So I'm hoping after tonight, nobody on the call here will find themselves in that spot.
I've got Gayron Williams saying, my case, traveling around Australia and New Zealand for 6 weeks. Any tips for being constantly on the move?
I guess having, as we said already, enough supplies of everything. And the way in which you're going to think about how you're going to carry insulin. Again, you're going to send it somewhere in advance where you're going to. If that's a practical option to think about, to give you peace of mind rather than to literally not carry everything yourself. If, God forbid, your bag got taken or something happened, God forbid, just finding a way to splitting the load between you or others on your group or at an advanced destination is something I'd be thinking about for that period of time traveling personally, I would suggest.
Some companies let you have a holiday loan pump, Rachel says.
They do. Again, it's very variable, hit and miss. We know the demand for insulin pumps currently is very high because of the national guidelines around who's eligible for a pump, which might just mean getting pairs of hands on spare pumps might be a bit less easy. So certainly, again, that advanced planning, that's one of the first conversations I'd have with a pump company if I was going to plan to go abroad, would be to ask about that possibility.
Will heat affect a PDM?
Yeah, I think with technology, I think with anything techie, a phone, we've all seen it, a laptop, the heat, sunshine, whatever, excessive. My worry is it can overheat circuits. And also, I'm not an expert, but I've seen it happen, as I'm sure you have. These things can be a risk with technology and heat, and equally extreme cold as well. So just be careful.
Okay.
I think there's a final slide, isn't there?
Okay, sorry, yeah, next slide. Sorry, Georgina. There you go. Okay.
I think, Georgina, there's a final one with just there we go, some links. Just to mention that we will send you an email with as much information as we can. I think the plan was to get rid of the PowerPoint presentation and give people the opportunity to ask a question in person rather than in the chat, if that's
Have
something
to
that's good.
unmute themselves.
So while people are thinking, I hope that everyone found that helpful. I appreciate I didn't have all the answers. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it will just give you lots of tips and things to think about, because I appreciate you're all from all corners of the UK and beyond, possibly. So your local situation of what's available to you and how you get it is going to be different. So hopefully the themes we've all covered this evening were relevant. The themes were relevant wherever you are. Is the execution that will be different wherever you are. That's the sort of overriding message of this: is think about before you go what to do and get those answers ideally sorted before you go. And especially from healthcare, as a healthcare professional, if you need support and literature, ask me as early as possible. Not me, obviously, don't all ask me, but if you need something medical, ask who your go-to with a good few weeks notice, ideally, if you can do it. We appreciate that an emergency trip may happen, I get it, and I'm sure most healthcare professionals do their level best to oblige. I've done that for people, with 24 hours notice, done a letter, emailed it to them, got it to them. It's doable, and so emergencies do happen, we understand.
I think it goes to show, doesn't it, just how much there is to think about when traveling with diabetes, and how much there is to plan.
For sure.
I think one of the things I always do is not take anything for granted. I always make sure I've got more than enough supplies to last me for several weeks. I know people in the past, without being an alarmist, because holidays are wonderful, but I know someone that got stuck in New Zealand when they had an earthquake there. And I know someone that got stuck in Iceland when the volcano,
the ash cloud
happened and the flights were grounded. But luckily she had enough supplies because she had planned ahead. So although those things sound dramatic, they can happen.
For sure.
Lots of thanks coming through.
You're very welcome.
Frequent. Craig saying, does Omnipod replacement every 3 days normally? Does frequency increase in hot countries?
Yes, anecdotally, no one's told me that, oh my gosh, I went away to a hot place, I'd use pods more often. That hasn't come up as a thing. That's not to say it won't happen. It's just different for different people, but you'd have to be burning through quite a lot of insulin to do that. So hot, if you're going to extremely hot and you've got to keep correcting your sugars and more insulin, you use the insulin more quickly, it could potentially happen, yes. So just be prepared, is the best I can say to you.
People asking for the comic book titles again.
Okay, so if you go to revolvecomics.com, there are 5 there. So revolvecomics.com, top of the page, there's a line that says something like read type 1 comics. If you click on that, it opens up all 5 of them and you can click and read away to your heart's content and enjoy the themes that are covered across the 5 issues to date, with part 6 due hopefully to drop, I believe is a technical term, at some point before the summer. Fingers crossed. And
I will put a link to those in the email that's going out to everybody, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and so everyone knows we've still got some time. We've still got about
please
20 minutes left of the webinar. So please, if you've got any questions, do ask them.
Or any hacks or things that we can learn from you. Please, you guys have lived experience of this. Tell us anything that's been great, or avoid anything I've said has been controversial. I'm not mean to be controversial. If there's anything you think that doesn't work or etc., we'd love to know both ways. So please, don't be shy. We're all friends here. Feel free to share.
I think one of the things I always do, Mike, is make sure that I'm wearing, and you touched on alert jewelry.
Yes, yeah.
I find this a little bit of it feels like a security blanket as well, knowing that you've got key information on you. You can wear, I wear a wristband, and I've got my dog tag, and it's got what type of insulin I'm on. It's got my dad's phone number. It's got, that I've got type 1 diabetes, and I've had to use that when I've not been able to respond
And it's critical, Lee. You're right. We appreciate not everyone wishes to have their diabetes like as you have so openly got there, Lee. And I get it. Everyone's different. I appreciate that. So, but just in which case, I will still urge everyone to at least tell their traveling companions they have diabetes. You don't want to wear anything. That's your choice. Of course it is. But just at least tell somebody I have diabetes. And in the event of X, Y, and Z, consider these actions. I just think it could really get you out of a spot. Well,
Definitely.
it's your choice, of course. I can see a hand up from Nicola. Is that right? Hi, Nicola.
Hiya, thank you. This is really, really useful information.
You're very welcome.
I know you've covered the Omnipod a bit and you might not be able to answer this.
Yeah.
But I just want to know, so you said not to suspend it, which isn't my plan, but I'm just wondering when you're on the aeroplane, if the altitude can affect the insulin delivery, like could anything go wrong?
Touch wood. Again, a lot of so in Southampton, our insulin pump service now has about 500 people on insulin pumps in our service,
Right.
and no one's come back and said to me, "Oh my gosh, I flew to Marbella and my pump went nuts on the airplane." That's not happened. That's a short haul flight, and long haul again. No one's come back to me and said, "I flew to America and my pump on the plane caused chaos." I think the trick is that if you're an insulin pump, it depends which one you've got. If you've got a closed loop system, it should be able to mitigate some of the high sugar levels. And of course, you can always offer, if you've got the regular old style pump, you give yourself a correction dose via bolus to obviously try and bring sugar levels down a bit. It's probably trial and error, I think, to be honest. That's the best I can set to look out for, I'd say to you. But good shout.
Okay.
I'll explore it at my end as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I've got a question which I've said talk to your pump team, but it was about how long do the 10 ml vials last, Medtronic 780 gram? How long do they last on average? Do you know?
It would partly depend on how much insulin someone's using per day, Claire, as a total daily dose, in truth. So it's a bit hard to answer in one question. It depends on how much insulin someone needs per day, because they hold, I think, from memory, 160 units, I think it is, or 300 units, some of the chambers. It depends which size your chamber is, how much insulin you use per day. Then you can do the maths and work it out. Cannulas, I should have said, don't forget, she must be changed every 3 days or so. I think Medtronic have got a new cannula coming out that's 3 days, but at the moment, I think it's 5 days. So between 3 to 5 days, change your cannulas as well, because they can get full of occlusion of old insulin and become crystallized and impede insulin delivery. So don't use the same cannula for more than 5 days, 100%.
Okay. Question from Faye about insurance. Been in hospital twice this year, once for diagnosis and once with norovirus. Would you consider this an admission to the insurance company? It shoots your quote up. They do ask you if you've been in hospital, don't they?
Yeah, again, it seems some insurance companies, Claire, people tell me they just sail through the questions, no issues. Some are just a bit more, do more of a deep dive into the situation. So with diabetes, the question I get asked about is about complications more than acute illness, to be honest. If you're admitted with DNV, that shouldn't put you as a high risk individual, I don't think, because everybody gets DNV, if that makes sense. Yeah. If you're somebody who gets admitted regularly with DKA, ketoacidosis, several times a year, that's a different conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I had the question, have you been hospitalized because of your diabetes? That's the question I get.
Sorry, I see what you mean. No, unfortunately, some can, well, as you well know, there are some primary diabetes emergencies, such as hypoglycemia, ketoacidosis, in which case the answer is yes, because that's a consequence of diabetes. Whereas if you've got pneumonia, let's say, and your sugar levels went up, that would not be diabetes doing that, if that makes sense.
No, exactly.
Yeah. That's how I would frame it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
I also think it's really important to be honest on those insurance applications.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You hear about people getting caught out and they've forgotten to tick a box, not on purpose. Find out they're not covered for something. So
so America's one of the worst is hospitalizations, God forbid. You could imagine, can't you, private something like that, being hospitalized in America. Imagine being hospitalized in New York or wherever, God forbid, unexpectedly hadn't had the insurance to cover it. That can be devastating financially, can't it? So
absolutely,
please plan for it. And as Lee said, be honest, don't try and hide anything, because they will find out, and they'll find every reason not to pay out, won't they? I can imagine some being cynical. I can imagine that might be the case in some companies.
Yeah, absolutely. If in doubt, ask them.
Yes, correct.
What was your insurance name? Danny's asking.
I think it was All Clear.
All Clear, but you'll maybe put some out on the email, will you, Lee?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll put as much as I can on there.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Any burning questions?
On the chat, I asked about if you were going through time zones and you couldn't stick to UK time, what's the best way of working out how to change your background insulin particularly?
Oh gosh, there are formulas for this sort of thing.
Are there? Okay.
Gosh, cop in the hoof. So I think keeping a watch on UK time is a starting point, Dorinda, to help you gauge when you left the UK, where were you? So you know how long acting insulin lasts, 24 hours, give or take, don't you? So by keeping a watch on UK time, you can work out roughly when 24 hours elapses in terms of needing your next dose, if that makes sense. If you're out by an hour or by a couple of hours, it shouldn't be a problem, but it's just recognizing that if you do have to move your jab time by a couple of hours, you can expect a bit of a sugar bump for a period whilst the dosing and the timings sort of align, if that makes sense. And to mitigate for high sugars, being hydrated is important. If you take insulin for meals, that shouldn't be a problem because you just jab when you eat. So
No,
that's
it's more
fine.
the background, isn't
It's
it?
more the background, correct? Yeah.
I mean, if the other country is only an hour out, I mean, I presume what
You
I've
leave it.
done is leave it, do you think?
For an hour, I wouldn't. Yeah, I probably wouldn't.
Really, you
adjust
wouldn't
it.
change it? Because I think I adjusted it half an hour one day and then another half an hour the next day or something.
Everyone's slightly different. There's no hard and fast rules, but certainly more than 3 or 4 hours, it's going to
Yeah.
cause a potential problem if you haven't factored that in, for example, and administered a bit less the next dose you have, and then got yourself back in sync.
Yeah.
There was I did see a formula. If I can find it, I'll try and share it.
Because if
with
it's
Lee
the
and
middle
Claire.
of the night,
Yeah,
UK time,
it's not
maybe,
practical. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there was a way. I saw it somewhere. I'll try and dig it out and find it.
I know Lee split doses his, but I can't because I'm on a different background. And mine's long. I'm on Toujeo and it's longer acting. They told me.
Yes, it is. And Levemir, for those that are on Levemir, is being phased out in due course. So it's an opportunity to consider that Levemir, you may be asked to change to a different insulin from Levemir in due course because the company are going to stop making it. So we're already just changing people across opportunistically. I'm not trying to panic anybody. If I come across a patient on my hospital, for example, on Levemir, I will take the opportunity to change them over at this point to try and mitigate the risk later on, for example.
How would
Yeah.
splitting the dose work?
Depends on
Lee?
your insulin.
Yeah, I mean, I could, I can, but I don't know how that would work timing wise and things. As you say, I need an equation.
Yeah.
I only split my dose because my background insulin allows me to do that, and it means that it doesn't run out early, and I get an overlapping curve, so that I've always got that background insulin working.
Right.
But the time zone thing is really interesting. I flew to Japan not long ago and left London at sort of 12 lunchtime and landed at 12 lunchtime. And
Oh, what do you do then?
it was really hard. My consultant said, just stay on UK time and then adjust yourself very slowly.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because obviously you go through time zones and that upsets your meal times as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
True.
yeah, and then of course, I think Mayank mentioned it in the slides. You've got different types of food as well. So you go through a time zone, you go through a whole mealtime change, and then in a country like, say, perhaps in the Far East, you're suddenly presented with noodles and soups and different types of food completely. So it's there's a lot of things to work out.
Well, I'm celiac as well, so that's an extra added complication. So I have to check out loads of other things as well.
More stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I do take small digital scales into the restaurant. I mean, people think I'm funny, but I weigh my rice or I weigh my potatoes, because I do that at home. And I think, well, I'm not good at estimating the amount. And because I'm very insulin sensitive, it makes a big difference if I don't get that right. So I find that quite useful abroad as well. I just get on with it, ask for a bowl and I weigh it.
I guess I would say if there is a good thing about diabetes, it doesn't have any national borders. So you go to another country and you're going to meet people that have diabetes there as well and understand, hopefully, what you're dealing with and trying to work out.
Yeah, they don't always understand celiac though, unfortunately. But anyway, that's another story which we
We'll do
won't
another
talk about
webinar
here.
on this one.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
Yeah.
Rita's asking about going abroad with her 12-year-old. Daughter was diagnosed type 1 after a severe DKA. Bit apprehensive on flying, but we do not want to stop going away as she still really wants to. I said, I'll ask Lee, and I said the comics might be good.
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously DK is scary. I appreciate that for a child, of course. Just read the question, sorry. So, yeah, I'd hope the comic books give her a sort of entry into that sort of world of diabetes problems in a kind of comic book educational and informative way to not scare her, but equally give her some confidence perhaps in terms of, it's common, it does happen to people, but if you plan for it and monitor, you massively can slash the risk of developing DKA.
Okay. Amy's asking about additional baggage for flying. Is this worth doing or not? I've had one bad experience and never tried again since. So, Amy, you're asking about booking extra bags for cabin luggage?
Yeah, I think
Well-
we're being sorry, go on, Amy.
I was told I was allowed an additional baggage for medical purposes. So then when I got to check-in and I checked that it was hand luggage, I checked it was hand luggage about 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 different people. They all said yes. I got to check-in. They promptly tried to refuse one of my pieces of hand luggage, either my medical baggage or my bag with everything else in it, my phone, my camera. It is a long time ago, but I never tried again because I'm too scared of that happening. Because it could have ruined a really nice holiday. Eventually, by going to the manager, they finally allowed me to have the 2 pieces of hand luggage. But being on a pump, your medical supplies take up over half the hand luggage allowance normally for a good week's holiday. Being sensible, taking all the things you suggested, it's that awkward. But I've never tried again because it's just so much stress. And as you said, Lee, about the airport, my blood sugar level gets 20 odd the minute we get near that queue.
Yeah, and I think once you've been through those experiences in an airport, it really does put you off.
Yeah, and now I've got kids who are incontinent, so that just adds to it. That's just fuel.
Yeah, I think I said to Mayank before we flew out to Austria last year that my airport anxiety was kicking in even before we got in there. But I do understand, and I think the airports, the staff, recent years, they've done a lot more training and awareness.
It is better, I think, but I've still not tried it. I don't know if anybody else does it because I've never really had the ability to ask so many people who might have used 2 bags or if they just use the one. My preference at the moment is still to use one.
Okay.
Rachel's saying that some airlines offer a free medical bag. I'll need to tell them in advance and print their authorization letter to take with you.
I can see John's got a hand up. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry, it's not a question. I just wanted to give some feedback on the Omnipod for the lady who was asking about the flight. Because I've been on Omnipod for a couple of years now, and I've flown several times, and I've actually been on a closed loop system since last August, and I've never had any instances of it spiking, or changing the insulin delivery whilst I've been on the flight. I understand everybody's different, but that's just my personal experience.
Thanks, John. That's great.
Lots of people mentioning that they've taken extra bags and medical bags on flights and haven't had any problems. So hopefully that's something that's changed, Amy. How are we doing for time? Well, it's 2 minutes to 9, so we've got a couple of minutes before we wrap things up. Has anyone got a webinar ending question? Or are we done?
Okay. Anyway, my bedtime, Lee, I think.
Absolutely. Have some cocoa. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap things up there. That's been a fantastic hour and a half. Just want to say a very big thank you to Mayank, Dr. Patel, for all your knowledge.
Very welcome. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. I learned loads tonight as well myself, so from all of you. So thank you, Lee and Claire, for also helping out, and Georgina, Heather, thank you all very much.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it was on the slides, but just wanted to say a very big thank you to Dexcom as well,
Of course,
who have
yeah. Thank you.
sponsored our event program for this year. Yeah, a thank you to them. They're a fantastic team over there. And we will say goodnight. As I mentioned, we will send out an email with lots of links to some information, things like the sunflower lanyards, insurance companies, other information that you hopefully will find helpful. And we'll put a list in there also of the other webinars we've got coming up this year. So we've got everything from type 2 prevention and path to remission. We've got why should I get involved in research? We've got a CGM webinar. We've got a multi-faith webinar talking about holidays throughout the year, like Diwali and Hanukkah and Christmas and Eid. So that's going to be an interesting one. We've got some in-person days. They're very localized in the north and in the south. So we'll send you the list, have a look, see what you think, and hopefully we'll see you on the other webinars.